look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I know cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. On the program today, we are getting ourselves down the road in life and pulling ourselves out of the weeds into a brand new future. And we have some exciting things to talk about on the program. But before we move too far down the road, I would be grateful if you could hit the subscribe button and the like button and share the link that you find up there in your browser with your friends. That's how we are found here on the big internet highway. And don't forget, anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, we want you to hit your pipes, your vaporizers, your bongs, and your joints, and make it a point to join us and take time for hemp. Yeah, on the program today, I have sitting in the wings my two favorite joint hosts on the broadcast. Bring on Al Byrne. He's the first joint host that came on to the broadcast last year and brought some guests with him. And he's also done a fantastic book that you need to make it a point to pick up and go and share with your friends as well. You can find it on Amazon. And so I'm going to bring on this joint host, Al Byrne. Hey, Al, happy Hemp Day.
Oh, thank you very much, Casper. And I just noticed your pipe. That's made by a fellow in Hawaii. Am I right?
That's right. Celebration pipes.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to have been given 3 or 4 of those as a gift for patients at a time when we were running our conferences, and we used them as an auction item. But they're beautiful pipes. I just happened to see that.
They are. So they're made of lava rock.
Right.
And he does it by hand. And this one happens to be covered with mother of pearl as well.
Right. Yeah.
And what I like most about them is you can rinse them out with hot water and they're clean in a minute and they're dry in a minute. You can get back to taking time for hemp.
There you go. Well, thank you for introducing me. I'm going to introduce our next co-host. I'll light up. Okay. I was just going to say, I'll light up in a minute when I say joint house, but he's also my co-host. He's another Al. He's in Canada. We will not ever hold that against him, okay? And Al Graham, you out there somewhere?
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Happy Hemp Day.
Happy Hemp Day. That's exactly right. Exactly. It's Tuesday, or it's Wednesday, or it's Thursday. Depends on what day of the week you're listening to us, because it's available 24/7, 365 days a week.
And it's also available on the PACE network, isn't it? Tell people about the PACE network.
Yes, the PACE Radio Network is people advocating cannabis education, and we touch on topics of cannabis as well as psychedelics. So find us at paceradio.net. There you go.
There you go. And I'm going to bring on jointly our joint guests today. It's Craig Roberts, and some of you may know Craig from being involved in a little TV show back in the day called Weeds, which I think won a handful of awards and just had a huge following. And some of you may know Craig from his work in Los Angeles, if you're local to that area. And some of you just may know Craig from his spirit. And so we're going to bring Craig Roberts onto the joint broadcast and let the whole world know how important it is to take time for hemp. Craig, welcome back to the broadcast. You've been on a couple of times, and it's always fun to have you on.
First time video that you actually get to see me, though. So pleasure to be here. Feel like it's the grumpy old stoners here. Glad to be part of it. Well, and I forget. Oh yeah, the Roberts thing. So my kids are all Rubin. Most people know me as Craig X Rubin from all the TV and movies that I was in. But the government took away my last name again. So even though my kids are Rubin, they said I couldn't be a Rubin anymore. I had to go by Roberts.
Well, see, I only knew you as Craig X. And now that you've got Craig Roberts listed on your social profiles, I thought, oh, well, now I finally know your real last name. Because it's kind of like you had X as a name long before Elon Musk gave that to his kid, didn't you?
Yeah, I changed my name when I was 19 years old. My grandfather had changed his name when he came into this country. A Canadian slipped across the border to work for Ford, Henry Ford, during the Depression, and he wouldn't hire Jewish people. So he went from Rubin to Roberts. All of his brothers did. And so my father was born Roberts. My grandma and I were real close. We used to smoke weed together. And she always told me how my grandfather felt like a phony when he was checking into a hotel. He was like, yeah, that's Roberts, Roberts for the last name. She's like, when in his heart, he was Rubin. And so when I changed my name years ago, it was weird for me because people would be like, Rubin, how do you spell that? I'd be like, capital J, little E, little W, you know.
It's that's interesting. My grandfather changed his name too. He was my whole descendants are Irish, and my grandfather was either born in New York or Pennsylvania in a given year or 6 years afterwards, depending which birth certificate you want to believe. So his background is somewhat foggy anyway, shall I say. But he was an Byrne, and he dropped the O when he moved to Boston. And when I was a teenager, I asked him, why aren't I an Byrne? Why did we get rid of the O? And he said, because when I came into Boston as Byrne, everybody knew I was Irish. And back then, in the late 1800s, being Irish in Boston was being, like a black person was in the slave days. You were you were nothing. You were nothing. And then there's the Jewish problem. Right. And then there's the German problem. So he said, look, when I dropped the O, I became Byrne. I could have been Jewish. I could have been Scottish. I could have been anything. And it helped him in business. So it doesn't surprise me at all that your family went through that same shitty transition as immigrants,
Oh, well, it's a very common thing. And that allowed my grandfather to work for Henry Ford, make enough money to go back to Canada, marry my grandmother, and then move to Buffalo and work for General Motors.
That's that's what I'm saying. My grandfather supposedly came out of Buffalo, went to Boston, but he became a very wealthy man, and he had hundreds of employees that he made paycheck for every week for years and years. It all worked out.
Right, and that's not an uncommon thing. So I'm not here whining and complaining about it. I'm trying to make humor out of it, make you guys laugh.
So why are you in Mexico
then? I'm not grumpy anymore.
I was just going to say, like an old friend of mine always used to say, you can call me JJ, you can call me RJ, you can call me Ray, just don't call me late to getting high. So how did you get involved?
Was that the guy down at the beach who used to sell the pipe? I remember that guy from Venice Beach. He was one of my early heroes from the late 70s. You guys know who he's talking about?
I do.
Come on, Craig. Get with it. You're 7 years old and you're smoking reefer or something. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm 60 this year. It goes quick, man.
Ooh, I remember those days of being 60.
Yeah, boy, it's a long fucking time ago.
Yeah.
What's funny is my father's 24 years older than me. I got a 9-year-old son, and I got one on the way. And I think, man, my dad was old when I was a kid. And now I'm thinking, man, we grew up together. He's such a young guy at 83.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved really into the cannabis movement and getting yourself becoming an activist?
Well, it was a real tragedy, a real horror story, if you will. My friend invited me over. His dad had a Betamax back in the late 70s. And he was the attorney for Ringo Starr, and that's my friend's father. And so they had a bunch of R-rated movies. I had never seen an R-rated movie before, and my friend had pinched a couple of joints out of Ringo's fag bag, his little merce, a little man purse. And so when the parents all went out, we were left alone. We were 12 years old. The 1970s, have long hair, like everyone. And my dad, I ended up smoking a little bit of weed. We really didn't inhale. We didn't know what we were doing. We kind of just blew it in. We were looking in the mirror, but we watched The Exorcist and Jaws, 2 R-rated movies, which my parents would have been horrified at. And we smoked some weed. And my parents said, hey, tell us what happened. Just tell the truth. You won't get in any trouble. And they're like, did you smoke any of the wacky tobacco? And so I said, yeah, we tried a little joint. We watched the R-rated movie, and my dad took me for a crew cut the next day. And my poor brother got punished as well. And we both ended up with crew cuts and wore baseball hats for the rest of our lives, or some kind of that. So we moved to Beverly Hills like a few weeks later, and we were down at the beach. My parents were roller skating in the late 70s. I was skateboarding, and I came up to a booth where the couple of guys were passing out some information, everything they didn't teach you about school and marijuana. It was a little fold-out pamphlet. It was prior to the Emperor Wears No Clothes. There was a bumper sticker that said, thank you for smoking pot. A notepad that said, while you were out getting stoned, so-and-so may have called, or some other kind of jokey pad. And there was one hemp shirt from Eastern Europe that was very rough with a big yellow label that said hemp on it. And I think Jack sold that for years and years. And so I just started volunteering down at the hemp booth in the summers. My parents would go roller skating. I would skate up to the hemp booth and hang out with the older stoner guys. And felt like I had taken one for the team with my crew cut. So they were very kind to me, and I learned a little bit about marijuana and about hemp back as a teenager, and then in high school learned more about it. Kind of became an activist in college, and upon graduating from UCLA, I opened up a hemp store called 2000 BC. The Stoned Age Hemp Shop on Melrose, and it was filled with lots of movie stars, and so that's how I got kind of into the film TV thing through cannabis.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we noticed in the information, the connection there, weeds and all that stuff. So yeah, it's good to find out how you got to that point.
Well, I wrote a book called 9021 Grow, which was originally an article for High Times magazine. And a friend of mine was related to the producer of the show Weeds and gave my book to her, the creator, Genji Kohan. And then she asked for more copies, and they brought me in as a consultant. And one of my best friends is a pretty famous actor. So I could do that. I always thought I could do that. So when they asked me to be a consultant, I just went, hey, guys, can I be on the show? And so that's how I got on the show. And I thought I was going to be like a regular, like I was going to be on the show. And then they brought me in. Well, first they said I had to audition. I said, I thought I was playing myself. They're like, yeah, but you're not a member of SAG. You got to audition. So,
okay.
So I auditioned. I got the part as myself. Thank God. It would have been difficult to tell my parents someone played me better than me. So once I got on that show, that led to a few more movies and different opportunities. And, I just had a good time, but it wasn't as big a role as I originally imagined, but I was still happy to be on for a couple seasons. And they let me do the comedy that when you talk about the episode during the DVD, I don't remember what that's called, the narration or something.
So, Craig, I'm curious about the formation of the show itself, the Weeds show. You seem to have known the creator. Can you give us a brief idea of how she got that going? Why that was a good idea in her mind?
Well, obviously it was trending, and I had grown up in Beverly Hills, and a lot of kids from my high school and movie stars were coming into my shop on Melrose all the time. Cannabis was more and more entering the cultural domain. And she came from a family, her father's won more Emmys than anyone else in Emmy history. His name's Buzz Cohan. Her brother had just had a hit television show called Dharma and Greg, I think. Was that a show?
Yeah,
That was.
I think that was his show.
All right.
It was one of those big shows. I'm pretty sure that was it. I'm not a big TV guy. So she came into it through her family connections. I'm sure her talent as well. She's also created another hit. She's a very talented woman. But she had both business acumen and connectivity, which is very important in Hollywood. If you don't have the right agent, the right access to producers, money, camera people, it's difficult to get something.
Yeah, I'm learning that myself. But so she also sniffed out apparently that society was ready. Is that right?
Yes. Excuse me 1 second. I'm in.
That's all right. That's all right. But by the way, folks, Greg is in Mexico, so we're continuing with our universal international thing. We've had a Mexican guest a month ago. Then we went to Australia, then Canada, and now we're back in Mexico. So
we're traveling the world.
Yeah, we're getting around, and the reason we're doing that, folks, is because these are smart guys, and they've done some amazing things about cannabis, and we just want you to understand there's a lot of ways to help. And these are some of the gentlemen and women that have done remarkable work over a long period of time. I mean, keep it now. This man is talking about doing this for the last 40-some years, right? You've been involved with cannabis?
Since 78, 79. So it's a long time. Like I said, I started young. What was interesting is how it did start. You know, like when we had our first Hemp Industry Association, there was 87 people there in New Mexico, and I think me and Chris Boucher might have been maybe Don Worshefter were like kind of like well known. And what was that?
I said, I know Donnie. He's been on the show a lot. I've gotten high with him. He's a character.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy. So there was there was a very small network of people that had been in High Times a few times, that had been involved with hemp for years. And then in 2019, I went to that MJ Biz show in Las Vegas, and there was 50,000 visitors there. And I thought, wow, I wish Jack was alive to see that. And I can remember being a youngster and wanting to see a marijuana field. And this company, Genius, when I was working for Mike Tyson, they invited me on this private jet, my first time on a private jet, to go see their 1 million pounds of hemp that they grew in this beautiful top flower. I ended up selling at least 60,000 pounds of it for them. But I had never seen marijuana growing like that, and I had always dreamed of it. So we get off the private jet, we go on this tricked out Sprinter, you know, they're trying to treat us all like really nicely. And we go out to the hemp fields, and I started crying. I was like tears of joy. I was so happy to see a marijuana field. I did stand-up comedy years ago, and I used to say, one day I'm going to get naked, run through my cannabis field, scrape all the trichomes off, and stick it in a pipe and be like, woohoo! And it was just so realistic to suddenly see it, and I could go running through the fields, and I didn't get naked.
Where was the field? What state?
California, Central California. And I think there's a prohibition on hemp in California now, but it was this beautiful crop. These guys, Charlie and Austin, I don't know if they want me to say their names, but these two geniuses were working for Genius, Austin Wagner and Charlie Sharp. I love these guys. And they helped bring in the right people, the right soil, whatever it was. They did it organically. And they grew this beautiful hemp. I think, grew too much of it that year. Everybody did. The first year, their company had made so much money that they invested more into them, thinking these guys were geniuses, and they started believing their own genius stuff. And, you know, when it's $200 a pound for hemp, everyone can be a genius. But when it drops down to $20 a pound for hemp, you know, it's hard to pay those bills. To pay for the silent pods working in there in the fancy offices that they had, and the private jets. So, but it was exciting, and it has been exciting to watch things change from the very beginning to now. And it's still, we're in the nascent state. You know, if someone's watching and thinking, oh, how can I get involved in cannabis? It's still such a wide open space. There's 400,000 people working in cannabis right now, and there's 4 million people working in the alcohol industry. And I think that eventually cannabis will have at least 4 million people working in this space as well in the next 20, 30 years.
I certainly would hope so, yeah.
I know that you
expansion for sure.
I know you decided to follow your character's plot line and put together your own little cannabis dispensary and smoke club, I guess, a cannabis club. And it's got a religious touch. Does that mean you got like pictures of Jesus saying, you know, it's your buzz, get high with me, get high and meet the Lord? What? I mean,
we still
meet us up on high. Meet us up on high.
This is the real tragedy part, is that I was raised Jewish and didn't know. I really studied the Bible hard. That was kind of what hit me about marijuana when my dad cut my hair. You know, I would have been studying for my bar mitzvah for 8 years and really believed in God and the Bible. And when my dad did that, we were really, like, my brother and I were both in shock, and we didn't even know we both smoked weed until a couple years later. But I really felt like God talked to me and said, oh, you're going to be involved in this somehow. You're going to help legalize this plant. And that was like right before I ran into those guys at the beach. And then all of a sudden I started learning about hemp and all these other things. And I went, man, that's why this happened. And you know how you try to make excuses for why things happen in your own life and you put reason to it. And so I did that at the time. And then as an adult, I got in a fight with my brother one time. Then I got in a fight with my father. I was staying at my brother's house while he moved to Amsterdam to do his THC clothing over there. And he needed me to take care of his dogs. And then when the dogs got sent to Europe, he didn't need me in his house anymore. And I had kids and I was living there, and I had left my nice apartment in Beverly Hills to come take care of his house and dogs. So we got upset with each other. Then my dad got upset with me, and I was like, F him. I'm going to read I used to read the Bible. I still read the Bible every night to my kids, to myself, whatever. So I had never really read the New Testament. So I said, F him. I'm reading the New Testament. Like that would piss my dad off or something. And and he didn't care. I never told him. But I started reading the Gospels, and I was like, oh, these guys are like stoners. These guys, you know, this is what Jesus was fighting for. The freedom, the system is wrong. Cannabis is right. You know, and I put this very much like I could relate to these guys fighting the church people, because they were in touch with God themselves and didn't need the temple and the Pharisees and the Sadducees to tell them what to do. They had their own authority direct from God, and that the Yeshua was there with them. And so I was like, oh, wow, that's kind of how I see us hempers fighting the man. We know this is good. It has value as a natural resource. It has value as a medicine. It has value for all these things. And it just seemed natural. So I became a Christian, a Jewish Christian. So then I thought, well, I didn't want to go, you know, try and convert Jewish people. I thought, who's my real community? The community that I've been in for years and years was the stoner community. So I created Temple 420, and all we taught was the Bible, but we taught the Old Testament on Saturday, the New Testament on Sunday, And I had spent a lot of years with the Havasupai Indians. I actually lived on the reservation at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And so I'm a sweat leader down there. I've been involved in their traditions, and they respect and honor Jesus as well. But they use a smudge and they pray with smoke. And then it was later discovered that they actually used cannabis in Jewish temples back in Israel 2,000 years ago in the time of Jesus. And, you can look up that document, like just Googling it right now, and you'll see that that's a fact. But what happened was I thought, wow, I don't want to reach out to like try and convert Jewish people to become Christians, but I thought I would just teach stoners the Bible, and that would work out for me. And I thought, oh, how could I finance it? I do my medical marijuana club, and I got 20 years for selling 2 grams of cannabis to a police officer with a doctor's note. So we were becoming real popular. I was on the TV show and movies, and they really wanted to shut me up, is what I found out later. And then my dad told me that the judges were paid off. My dad worked in government, and told me that a guy named Zev Yaroslevsky was just conversing with him. They had known each other for years and years. And Zev told him, he goes, yeah, if we didn't pay off the judges, we'd be hit with millions of dollars in lawsuits for all the fuck ups that we do in the county and the city. I think it's the county. He was a county supervisor at the time. So that they were paying off judges. And so in my case, I ended up with 20 years and 7 years in state prison, 13 years probation on a suspended sentence. But
good golly.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, they took my life savings. My wife and I lost our house at the time. We ended up coming really close together, and then one of the judge gave us permission to reopen. We had worked for years. We reopened Temple 420, and then they came and arrested me and seized our money again the day we opened. Even though we had told them we were doing it, they said we didn't have the permit. I got arrested for not having a permit. Once we showed them the permit in court, they changed the charges and said, well, you're on probation anyways. I said, well, I have permission from the judge. They're like, we don't care. Any contact with the police is a probation violation. So we ended up splitting up, lost our store. I mean, it was a real tragedy. My kids, my oldest kids and I were not close for a while. I tried to see them as much as I could, but we were homeless for a couple years, living in hotels, not on the street, homeless, but still like never making enough money to put first and last into an apartment or in a house again. So it was a real challenge. I suffered a lot. My family suffered a lot because of cannabis. And I eventually became an international fugitive and just left the country after I found out that I had been railroaded in court by a corrupt judge who had been receiving money from the county to throw the case. And so then I've been in Mexico ever since. I got my green card here, had more children down here, met another woman. And, so life does go on, and I don't complain about America. And then since they passed Prop 16 or 64, which was interesting because it was 10 years to the day that I was arrested that the law changed. And then my record got cleared up. So I was able to get a passport and get my ID back, but they wouldn't give me my Rubin ID. They said I had to be Roberts to match my birth certificate because I had changed my name.
How are you finding it there in Mexico when it comes to the cannabis end of things?
It's completely illegal here unless you get an amparo. If you're rich, you can just get an amparo that says you use it personally and you're allowed to grow your own and not sell it. But you have to pay like $250 to do that, which is a lot of money for most people. So I don't have one of those at the moment, but I do buy cannabis. Like $10 a week is enough to make enough for the week. Which is
that's an hour. That's an hour for me. Excuse me.
I know,
it sounds like a joint.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I used to smoke. My brother and I joke around the value of like ounces. Remember when pot was more than an ounce of gold?
Yeah.
And we were smoking probably like 3-4. I mean, we both had good companies making lots of money back then, but we'd smoke 3-4 grand of weed a month, give it out to friends, smoke it ourselves. Do you want to use my phone? Go ahead. Okay. That's my 9-year-old. Hey, Sammy, you want to come say hi real quick? You guys, this is my handsome little son here. Super smart, great, nice kid too. He loves Messi.
Hi. How you doing, Sam?
He just brought me a glass of orange juice.
All right.
Coca-Cola.
Looking after Dad.
All right, go play your games or whatever. So I'm grateful to be joining you guys and getting to tell my story. It's been a long time, and it's been, like I said, some ups and downs, some real challenges.
Mm-hmm.
One of the highlights was getting to work for Mike Tyson and get to meet him, and that was a lot of fun.
So are you retired from the cannabis movement now? You just sitting around watching Frasier reruns and wondering what's next at the nursing home for dinner?
I haven't watched TV since 1991 on a regular basis. I after I saw that Gulf War, I was like, this is all lies anyway. So I never even saw my own show, Weeds.
Well, no, what I'm getting at, are you still involved in the cannabis movement now? Are you still working as an activist, or are you just twiddling your thumbs and watching the sunset?
I'm part of a group that's trying to buy a cannabis magazine that was put into receivership. So hopefully we'll have some positive news on that today. And then I'd like to be the chief revenue officer. I own a house up in the States, so I'd like to maybe go back there and figure out how to make this magazine really successful and turn it into more of a media empire. Who knows where it could go?
Yeah, exactly. You never know.
Mm.
One thing leads to another, right?
Yes, one thing leads to another, and I've got 5 kids so far and 1 on the way, so I've still got a future to build here. I'm not ready to be watching Frasier just yet.
Well, no, you got to take care of your family first. That's a man's job. But let me just say, I'm sorry for what cannabis brought to your life that was so negative. I mean, you've really paid it. Well, no, you've really paid a price. And all the time I've ever been involved in this, it was guys like you and the sick that just kept motivating me to keep on going, because, I mean, that whole story is just a story of injustice as well as just blatant stupidity. And that's not what we wanted for you or anybody else. So I can't apologize for him, Craig. But
well, you weren't in law enforcement, were you, Al?
Huh?
You weren't in law enforcement, were you?
Well, I was in the military for 24 years, but no, I've worked with a lot of cops over the years, including a couple of different times the head of state police for different states. And in fact, I went to meet with the guy in Minnesota one time years ago, and he came into the meeting with a bunch of chocolate chip cookies and some milk. I thought, he said something about, just in case you got the munchies while you're talking with me or something like that. So I did find that, and I did find the guys, law enforcement in general, couldn't have given a goddamn about cannabis. I had a lot of officers say, well, I get up with a guy with cannabis, I know I'm not going to get in a fist fight with him. Whereas somebody that's been drinking, man, it's always a problem. And they understand that. They're on the streets. They deal with cannabis people, which are essentially nonviolent. We all know that.
And this gives me a chance to jump in and talk about our archives, because if you get into our archives, you'll discover that once a week, I have Peter Criss, the co-founder of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, on as a joint, here you go, host. And we would bring on members of the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition organization as guests every week. And Al, you're absolutely right. Many members of law enforcement are less concerned about drugs and more concerned about violence.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's people smoking a joint in their couch watching a R-rated movie are not a threat to anybody. But you're out there running around drunk on the road, or sure, that's that, or getting in fights, or I won't go into it, but I just had a talk this morning with an MD, and she was talking about the same issue, She's just come back from India, and India's fallen apart because of alcohol. And we are, that's what we're all saying here. But nevertheless, Craig, I'm sorry for the trouble that you were brought. It was unfair. Nothing we can do about it, but
well, here, I'd like to say I appreciate your concern and empathy for what I went through. It was definitely a challenge. And it has created, a disparity between my friends and I. My friends are worth millions, some of them, and I have nothing to complain about. I'm very fine and happy. I eat well. I grow chickens and potatoes, and I'm just blessed to get all this fresh food. I have love from lots of my children. I'm close with my family now. And even my ex and I communicate sometimes, and she helped me with trying to finance the magazine. So there is a light at the end of any dark time, and we all go through hard times in life, that's for sure. And I would just reflect back to my faith in God was able to help me get through those really difficult times. And everyone who believes in Jesus or God or puts their faith in the Bible will go through challenging times, and hopefully it doesn't break you and just helps make you stronger. But I appreciate that compassion, because it is a challenge, and I'm sure you guys on this show talk to people all the time who've been through these challenging situations and just tragedy, true tragedy, where I try to make fun of it. I know it's been a challenge, but with a good sense of humor and faith in God, it gets you through those difficult times, so that you can keep moving forward and knowing that there is a future, and that this life is just, we're here for this time, and it's part of
we can see that. We can see that, man. You're walking proof of what you just said. I'd say on top of it, congratulations, because you've pulled yourself out of a bad spot and you've done well, and that's very admirable. And I'm glad though that the audience is hearing you, because we talk about our archives and they're incredibly valuable. But for the younger folk, they don't understand what guys like you went through. They don't get it. No. They've grown up in there it is, and so telling that story, I hope a younger audience will say, "Whoa, wait a minute, it was different then."
Yeah, because my kids just roll into a dispensary right now, and they're like, "Put the credit card," and they buy some weed. And I'm like, "You guys have no idea, what it was like trying to score some weed when you were 15 years old."
Or stay out of jail. I mean, the arrest levels were almost $1 million a year for just possession. And year after year.
This is what most people don't realize, is that the war on drugs was really just a war on marijuana. Of course, they went after cocaine and heroin, but the CIA was dealing it. So only they went after the street level people, never the big people, to actually stop it. With cannabis accounted for 85% of all drug arrests in the United States. Yeah. 85%. And that means 85% of the people in jail for drugs were in jail for marijuana.
Yeah.
Well, and it's because, as you know from Jack's book, from our history, it's because the powers that be back then wanted to continue to be the powers that be, and they saw that cannabis, hemp, with medical cannabis and it being used as food, and hemp being used as paper and fiber and fuel, that the people who had money then would not have money. There would be an exchange of wealth from the petrochemical companies to the farmers. And because of that, they made it a point to go after.
Well, and here's the reason why. Here's the reason why. It's easier to centralize if you're a banker, to organize some big businesses like the oil companies that you can centralize, the coal companies, the big ag, where you're a distributor of like General Mills, Kraft Foods. These people that own these food companies own the tobacco companies, they own the alcohol companies, and they own the oil companies. And so they pushed out, like you said, the individual farmer, because an individual farmer doesn't necessarily have a group collective for negotiating, for bargaining. he's his own farmer. And one of the things you could do back in the day is if you ran out of gas, you could go to any farm because they actually made diesel fuel, hemp diesel or biodiesel with some of their corn for running their tractors. And this was a way to take that away from being a homespun business into being a centralized business.
Well,
I've seen the same thing happen in cannabis right now. They flooded so much money in 6 years ago. The stocks went crazy. There was overinvestment. And then these companies collapsed. And then as the companies are collapsing, they're being centralized by the bankers and stockbrokers right now.
Well, I can hear Gatewood Galbraith's voice in my head telling me, and I'll share this with our audience as the best I can as Gatewood would. It would be, I tell you, brother, Kentucky was one of the wealthiest commonwealths in the hills of America. That Kentucky led America in education, led America in farming, led America in prosperity in our business. And it's because of hemp, brother. I tell you, it was hemp. And after they outlawed hemp, I'll tell you, brother, Kentucky went from being the most prosperous commonwealth in America to be now the most impoverished state in America. We can't afford to take care of our schools. We can't afford to take care of our roads. Our farmers are gone broke, and we no longer have a resource in our state to provide for our people. And it's because they outlawed hemp. I tell you, brother, and if you want to put hemp back into the market, make it a cash crop, that's what's going to happen. You'll have a change of wealth. And the farmers, I tell you, brother, the farmers will start getting their part of this pie. That's my best Gatewood. Thank you very much.
I remember him. He passed away, didn't he?
He did. I loved him so dearly. He was on my show about once or twice a month. And Gatewood pushed me into being a cannabis activist. Gatewood was a champion of this show.
He was like a hippie in a suit, is what I remember about him. He was always
to the young'uns, he was a lawyer in Kentucky, very dignified gentleman, tall, very well dressed, always wore like a very polished cowboy hat. He had that Kentucky drawl and smart as hell. And he was a champion of hemp from the get-go. I met up with him years ago running Normal, had him speak at some of our conferences. And he's just a terrific gentleman. Just to make Craig's point about the farmers used to run their tractors on this stuff, at one point, to prove a point, Gatewood decided he got a hold of a used diesel Mercedes-Benz, a sedan. And he loaded the back end of it down with like 1,000-gallon tank of hemp oil, or hemp gasoline, if you will. And he drove that thing around the country using that fuel to make a point. And if you don't know, when you
owns it now.
Yeah, and hemp fuel, when it is burned, has no exhaust. There's no pollution that comes out of the tailpipe. So yeah, Gatewood Galbraith, just so you all know, he has passed. But we hadn't forgotten.
I've been in that Mercedes before. It was like a tannish Mercedes.
Yeah. It was an old Mercedes of some kind, but it had no problem. Drove it all over the place.
Yeah, I think one of my friends was in the car driving around with them.
Yeah, really.
Gatewood walks in my heart. Gatewood walks in my heart every day. My first time in High Times magazine was with a photograph of Gatewood when they did a story about Time for Hemp. And Gatewood introduced me to Willie Nelson, and Gatewood kept pushing me to do more Time for Hemp segments and kept pushing me to do Time for Hemp podcasting, and kept telling me that the stuff that I was doing was so important, I couldn't stop doing what I was doing. And because Gatewood kept pushing me, we now have a large archive at Time for Hemp. I love you, Gatewood.
Did you guys know Dennis Perrone and Jack Hare and all those guys?
I did. Oh my gosh, I got Dennis in my archives. I used to sit and listen to Jack and Dennis argue on the phone. Dennis would say, all use is medical, all use is medical. Jack, is not going to do you any good. Be talking about fiber and fuel. If you're not talking about medicine, no one cares. And Jack would say, everybody knows about medicine. They had that for years. They don't know about fuel. They don't know about paper. We're going to be doing the hemp organization. Jack, you don't know. It's medical marijuana. You don't know, Dennis. You don't. And I used to listen to that an hour.
Al, did you guys know Dennis and Jack? And
Well, I had a totally different relationship with both of them. Yeah, I was running normal back from, I don't know, 89 to 94 or something like that. So these guys were, we were all always working together. And the thing that we had, the three of us, and a few more, had in common that is not obvious is that we were all veterans. So regardless of our differences, Jack and Dennis, for instance, on this debate of what should we do as a unit, they loved each other. Don't ever think that these guys weren't close. And as a veteran, I fit into their mold, and we did a lot of work together in different ways. I arranged, for instance, to have Dennis came. He called me up one day. And I was on the board of directors of Normal, and he said, Al, can you get me on the board of directors? I said, boy, Dennis, I don't think that's going to be a problem. And he said, well, I'd like to get on. So I got him on. So he comes to D.C. for a meeting, one of the first meetings. And I said, Dennis, what do you want? And he said, I want you to help me get the Normal conference out to San Francisco. And I said, we don't do that. We have them in D.C. He said, I want you to help me, Al. And as soon as we get that conference done, I know we can do it. Then I went off the board. And I said, well, I'm being honest with you. I just want to use you, motherfuckers. And I said, so anyway, we got the conference out in San Francisco. It went very well, and he resigned. So that's the kind of the way we worked. It was all above board and all friendly. And both of those guys were leaders. They led by, we all know this, but if you don't out there, these guys led by example. They were at the point of the spear. They asked nobody to do anything they hadn't already done themselves 100 times, and they were willing to take a punishment. Dennis Perone, unarmed, was shot by a San Francisco policeman just because the guy hated him so much. And, of course, the cop walked. These guys paid a price, and it's good you brought them up. They're well respected within the community, and they should be.
The first time I met Dennis Perone was my very first day as a cannabis activist. Jack had been trying to get me to come to work for him because his office was a mess. He needed somebody to sort out and get the books out and T-shirts out and a lot of other things. And I kept turning down his offer, but he had me come out to his house there on Venice Beach. And the day I came out there, they were working on the California Hemp Initiative, and at his house was Dr. Todd Miccaria, Dennis Perone, Ed Rosenthal, Chris Conrad, and the guy from California Normal, Del Geringer, and Jack Hare talked me into, with Captain Ed, talked me into coming on board to run his office, and I took an oath in front of that room full of people that I, Casper Leitch, would be a cannabis activist until I was age 65 or the day I died, or it was legal, whichever came first. So help me. And I took that oath in front of Jack wouldn't let me start work for him until I took that oath. So
Jack and Ed said they were 84.
All right, yeah. So I took that oath in front of that room full of people. That was
at Brenda Kirschbaum's house in 1991.
Yes, it was. Oh my gosh, Jack and Brenda. I used to work in that house, and Julie always dropped off my paycheck, and what sealed the deal was Jack offered me a car to drive to and from, offered to hire somebody to be a driver, a lousy driver. Offered me more money than where I was working at, and I still wasn't interested. And from the back of the room, I hear Captain Ed say, "And we'll give you an ounce of pot every Friday." And I said, "I'll start Monday."
To answer your question, Craig, up here in the Great White North, I don't have any interaction with either one of the gentlemen. Obviously, I know of both of them, but as far as when it comes to Jack, I read Jack's book, "The Emperor Wears No Clothes," and I learned tons. And I thought People got to know about this. And I started a cannabis educational series where I went to different cafes and I would show different documentaries about the benefits of cannabis. And one of the movies was history on Jack Hare. And it talked all about what all he had done and gone through, and how he was a Republican, but he supported cannabis and how it could save, basically the planet. And every year I would show that for the April 20th, or the April showing of the documentaries, was to highlight Jack's work and help further his knowledge onto others.
And since we're talking about Jack Hare, let me remind people that if you go to the Time for Hemp blog, you can find that I have brought Jack Hare back to life with the art of AI. And there's a blog there that features Jack Hare. When you spend some time on that blog, you get to know Jack Hare like you spent the day with him. And you get a free copy of his book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And you see Jack Hare introduce Hemp for Victory, and hear about how he and his friends unearthed that video, that film, to make it possible for people to still have it today. And it's Jack Hare that began the archives, along with Gateway Galbraith and Captain Ed. Long time ago, they began unearthing relics of our past that now today seem to hold a lot of truths for next generations. Right, guys?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can talk about Dennis with the medical issue too, because while I was trying to introduce it, he was out there again in San Francisco, just pushing it in their face. He just wouldn't get out of the way. And I found him most helpful to the conversation that I was trying to get going. And again, we worked forever. And those guys were dedicated. That was their thing. They knew they had knowledge and they could help people, and that's what they were going to do. And again, when you look at the whole concept of those days, including Casper here, ex-Army, most of the leadership that dominated the conversation back in the 80s were 80s to 90s were veterans. All the guys that really made a difference, they were used to stepping up. And I think the fact that we each knew we were out there and that we would find each other's back if we could in the debate that we're having trouble with, that gave us a lot of confidence, I think, to continue on. And of course, these guys were confident men.
I was at that. It was the 1990 or 1991 final wording of the California Hemp Initiative at Brenda's house, where Casper took the oath. And so we were working on the final wording. And so Jack says, invite everyone and get a bunch of people down there. We want to really take some input on what we should change for the final wording. And so I agreed with almost everything, and it came down to this one last vote. And Jack said, he said, should it really be 18 or 21 for the age that we should put in this final wording? And I said, listen, it should be 18. If you can join the military at 18, you should be able to smoke cannabis at 18. You shouldn't have to wait till 21. Correct. And he says, well, we're trying to follow the wine regulation. So we're using the basically our lawyers have taken the wine, whatever their outlaw was or outlaw regulations for the regulations. And we're applying that to marijuana. We think it should be the same. Well, let me tell the story real quickly, Casper. He says, all right, let's take a vote, everyone. Who thinks it should be 21? After Jack makes this whole speech, it should be 21. Everyone almost follows Jack and votes for 21. He goes, and who thinks it should be 18? Jack and I are the only ones to raise our hands. And I was kind of pissed at him. I appreciate him. I feel like, okay, I'm glad he had my back. But at the same time, I felt like had he made the pitch for 18, he was convincing enough and had enough authority at the time that we could have had it be 18. Not that we made the ballot anyways, but and then go ahead, Casper. I didn't mean to.
Okay, since you were working on the 1991 Hemp Initiative, I was too. That's one of the reasons why Time for Hemp was launched was so that we could use the audio and the video from the community cable access and the advertising. So that means you and I probably worked side by side and just don't remember it at a couple of points in our path in life.
Oh, I remember. And I used to see you at the public access in Pasadena because I used to do my show out there. I would do one with Richard Marcella. We would do Hemp for Victory.
I love Richard.
Yeah. So I started financing Richard's show and being putting my store and my name on the back there. And then we started producing comedy shows that ended up into a couple movies.
Well, forgive me for not remembering you, and I'm grateful that you were nice enough to remember me. So
I do remember you, my friends from UCLA, and I thought you might have been a cop too when you took the oath. So
no.
All right. Now let me tell you about my story about Dennis. So I know this guy named Bill Bridges who's taking pictures for High Time.
Oh yeah. Bill got pictures of Willie and I. I love Bill. Tell him hi. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay, so I've taken Bill to the Grand Canyon, down to the Indian Reservation. We've done protests at UCLA, out at the Federal Building, and so he's gotten pictures of me, and I become the freedom fighter of the month for High Times. And he tells me, there's a guy in San Francisco selling weed. I'm going up to take pictures of him. I'm like, you're kidding. He's like, yeah, it's out in the open. It's a medical marijuana club. They don't care. Da, 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 da. He goes, we got to go see him. So me and this guy, Luca, and Bill, we pile in the car. We go see Dennis. We just show up. We say, hey, we're the freedom fighters. Let us in. And they're like, they whip out their magazine. They're like, okay, yeah, you're cool. Come on in. It was all sick people in there, but everyone was having a great time. Everyone was eating. There was Brownie Mary, and we meet all these characters. And so Dennis, before we leave, sets me up with a pound of weed. He's like, listen, I'm fronting you a pound of weed. I got all these people down in this one. It's $5,000 a pound too. He goes, I got all these people down in LA that need medical marijuana. You've got a hemp store. I'm going to send them to you. He goes, they're mostly AIDS patients and cancer patients. And I was like, fuck it. I'm like, if I get in trouble for cannabis, at least I'm healing people and healing the sick. It's something I believe in. I'm like, all right, I'm willing to take the risk. And the first week we put up our big cannabis leaf in front of the store, 2000 BC. Maybe it was like the first couple months. This father and his 14-year-old son, we're right around the corner. We're on Melrose, around the corner from Cedars-Sinai Hospital. The guy comes in, his 14-year-old is puking in front of our store. He's getting chemotherapy. He's got leukemia. And the dad just wants to get him some cannabis because the doctor told him it might help him. And so we end up getting all these patients, people like that, and then people that Dennis sent us. And we did that for almost 7 years. Well, not quite 7 years, but almost 7 years, until 1996 when it got legal. And then this guy, I didn't used to like him, but he told us, he's like, listen, you're not gay. And if you don't give me all your patients and everything, I'm the new medical marijuana club in town. Scott
Imler. Scotty Imler?
Yes. So we ended up giving all of our patients to him, and we just quit right then. But about half of them came back to us. But yeah, Scott basically said, you can't do this anymore. I'm the only one doing it in LA. And then at one point, there were 1,600 medical marijuana clubs in LA. And I wanted to distinguish myself as a church because there had been the decision, UDV versus Gonzalez under President Bush, where this church in New Mexico was allowed to import, sell, distribute, and consume on their church a Schedule I hallucinogen, ayahuasca. And so cannabis is Schedule I also a hallucinogen under the same thing, but clearly it's both benign and benevolent. So we thought, well, here's our opportunity to do something positive, teach the Bible, reach people with this positive message. And the funniest thing was, the Jews all came on Sunday to learn about Jesus, and the Christians all came on Saturday to learn the Old Testament. We even had a cantor and a rabbi who I went to high school with, who were at like a big major synagogue, and they're like, "Listen, we're here, but we wanted to come on Sunday and find out what Jesus is all about."
And I'm sure there's been a couple of times in your path then that you've broken bread with Roger Christie.
Oh yeah, Roger and I still stay in touch. I love Roger. I feel horrible
too.
for him and his wife that he had to spend so much time in prison and suffer so badly as well, because he's such a kind-hearted person. I'm glad he's still alive and doing well.
Absolutely. He was a guest on my show quite a few times, and he was one of the people who also was a champion of Time for Hemp. When Time for Hemp first started doing video releases, Roger made it a point to start putting his money and his efforts behind that to keep that production afloat. So I've been blessed to have had Roger as a friend in my path in life.
Yeah, he's just a kind-hearted man. I really love
And
him.
Bill Bridges, again, he's still with us, right? Tell Bill I have never forgot him, and I send him my love.
I haven't seen Bill in years. There's a lot of people that I know have passed away and that we really miss. There's too many to really count them all. But you remember Peter McWilliams?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a tribute to Peter on my website.
Yeah, Peter.
Got it straight in my drawer.
When I first opened 2000 BC, they arrested me. I mean, they keep arresting me, but they arrested me for using the word bong instead of water pipe. And that was why I appreciate you veterans and stuff. So they came in, they arrested me, they seized everything, and I'm living in my store at the time in the back. So I just graduated college and decided to open this hemp shop. And John Rappaport, the writer, have you guys ever heard of him?
Yes.
No.
He's a very kind guy. He was writing for the LA Weekly at the time. And I said, I'm a capitalist. I said, I don't know why they're arresting me. I said, I'm just here to make some money. And I said, I believe in free speech. I said, I can't believe they could arrest me for a bong instead of a water pipe, but I could sell a water pipe, no problem. I said, is this not America or what? So he wrote this great article about me, and people started coming in like crazy to my shop. And then we were selling bongs out the back of our car.
Yeah. Captain Ed's head shop, Heads and Highs, and Lion's Lair out in Van Nuys supported Time for Hemp. And I lost track with the people out at Lion's Lair. But they were just wonderful, caring people. And I tell you, you're bringing back memories that are just mind-blowing to me. And I'm so grateful that I have these. That's one of the things that I have been blessed with the cannabis movement. It is a family. And I have found so much love in the hemp movement. So much love. And when I'm not part of the hemp movement, I am kind of empty. But when I'm busy doing things like this, I feel full. I feel alive because I'm spending time with my family.
Right. Well, yeah, there were times I felt exactly the same, where it was just a family. There's been times when I felt a little betrayed by people in the family too, and have seen, murders go without being prosecuted, like Les Crane and stuff. Or Jeff Jacobs, who I'm in a couple movies with, how he was murdered and under, somewhat suspicious circumstances. So it's really, I felt like there was a big COINTELPRO against our movement as well. The person that I was really close with, he had spent time in my house, but he actually, when they arrested me at Temple 420, they came in and we were doing everything by the book. So, can I say his name? I don't want to.
Yeah,
it's up to yourself.
Yeah, because I don't care. He can sue me if he wants. I've been begging him to sue me for years because I still have all the videotapes. Like I hang on to that shit. But there was a gentleman named Brett Bogue. He was working with High Times. He had met my brother in Amsterdam, and I was buying some cannabis from him for the medical marijuana club. And we see it on the videotapes later. He actually showed up with the cops that arrested me. and his brother who's there was like throwing signals. He walked out right before they came in and arrested me. So we wrote him a check for the cannabis that we purchased. And we were just building up, at our Temple 420. And so we were trying to do it all legitimately, getting Social Security, paying checks for everything like it was a business, paying our taxes.
Yeah.
And so my own friend was involved in having me arrested, which was a real heartbreaking experience. Someone that I had been close with, spent the night at my house. I had been to their house, know their wife and children, and they knew my kids. So that was part of the bad part of feeling like family sometimes. But I guess maybe he got in trouble, was trying to get out of trouble. I don't know what his reasoning was or thinking, but it was really that broke my heart almost as much as anything else.
And you sound like you were in the same situation pretty much as Lynette Shaw, who had the first medical cannabis dispensary in the state of California. And she was trying to do it by the numbers, by writing checks and keeping track of what she spent and what she brought in and who she paid what to. And it turned out that though she was trying to do it by the numbers as a business would, they used her business records to put her in jail and to take away her. She fought as she won. And it took about 8 years almost.
Right. No, there was a couple
Went
other.
through a lot of crap.
I forget Angel Rach also.
Oh yeah, Angel.
There was, believe me, there's so many people that we've known. And the woman that runs the Last Prisoner Project, do you remember her name right now? Stephanie Landa.
I don't know her. I know of the project, but
yeah, there's just so many awesome people, like so many great, like I was close with Lynette at one time. She was very close with Bill Bridges too. Sometimes when I see you, Casper, it really reminds me of all these old times, the public access TV, all that crazy stuff back in the day. And it's just a challenge. And I think part of it has been the United States. And I haven't done any interviews in years. I think the last one I did was growing up Beverly Hills. Some friends of mine from high school asked me to do their podcast. And that was like 3 years ago. And we talked a little cannabis, but it was more Beverly Hills, what we remembered about growing up there. But I always felt like this was getting so corrupt. Our government was just so bad. I didn't even want to talk about it and put myself out there too much. But I feel like things are starting to turn around a little right now. It's getting a little more conservative. Hopefully we'll have paper ballots and one day voting soon. And things just get better for free speech all around. But it seems like we've been through real challenging times because of the political situation. And part of that started with cannabis too, because the government was really corrupt in 1972 when they created the Controlled Substance Act versus the 1920s when they prohibited alcohol. And one of the reasons for that alcohol prohibition is it stopped those farmers from making some of their own fuel, and it consolidated that. And then you had the 1937 prohibition of cannabis, which was through the Marijuana Tax Act. But the same people that had worked in alcohol prohibition then went to work for it. And when they made the alcohol prohibition, they had enough respect for the U.S. Constitution to pass an amendment and then have to pass another amendment to terminate the prohibition. But they went around it in this sneaky bullshit way with the Tax Act in 1937 and then in 1972 with the Controlled Substance Act, which again was very political based on Nixon's fighting the left, which was being financed by some of these kids dealing drugs on college campuses and protesting the war. And now we have, I was just saying, now we have 100,000 people a year dying of fentanyl being smuggled into our country, and you can't get a person out in the street to freaking protest this shit. And we had 58,000 people die over 15 years in Vietnam, and people were ready to have a revolution over that. Yep. So it's kind of like our country, for a 3% stamp tax or T tax, we were ready to overthrow the British. And now we're slaves working for the government until September, October, how much do they take between, licensing and fees and taxes. It's like, and not only that, they print our money out of thin air. We don't even have gold and silver anymore since August 15th of 71 when we went off the gold standard. So we really are in some form of, I don't know, mental slavery, as Bob Marley would say, you know, but it is, sure, we still have the ability to buy material things and work for money, but at some level, we're working for someone else for something they print for nothing.
Well, I can tell you
no other critter on earth works for money.
Exactly. And I can tell you, we don't work for money here at Time for Hemp. We don't have any sponsors.
That's another point. Yeah.
We have no sponsors, no grant money. We just wake up each day, cross our fingers, and hope the lights are still on. And so I want to remind people of that. I'm going to get my Cash App thing up so you can make a donation if you want. But we do make it because you share us with your friends. We are at the end of the hour. And Craig, is there anything you want to share with our audience before we say la vie?
I appreciate you grumpy old stoners for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad we could relive some of the ups and downs of the cannabis movement. And I guess my last thing would be read your Bible, get some exercise, and get into the cannabis industry because it is growing and there's space for you if that's something you want to do.
And Al Byrne, I know you got a groovy book that people can pick up at Amazon and read.
Well, it's everywhere. It's Amazon, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you got a book, it's there. And curiously, as there's a couple of, the book is a history book of how it went down, at least in my world, between 1985 and a couple of years ago. And that includes another 20 years prior to 85, where I was in the Navy, and how the government, Navy, military interfaced with the cannabis plant at different times in those 20 years. It was strikingly different depending. So that's the for country part. The for cannabis part is 1983 on, the development of medical cannabis in the United States. How did that happen? Craig, you mentioned, you were talking about some of the people like Dennis and Jack and others, and you're saying it's almost too many to mention. That's why one of the reasons I wrote the book. I mentioned them. All of those people you talked about are in that book. Now, there only might be 2 sentences, but I wanted them remembered. I wanted people to understand that their sacrifices, like you, were huge, and that they were courageous people. They had something to say. They weren't afraid to say it. The other thing, you corrected Casper, and you didn't. Casper says it's a club, and you said, yeah, it is, but it isn't. And I agree with both of you. I have had the same experience. I wrote it in the book. There are some people in here I'll die for. There are other people that betrayed me. And they were very close and all of that. So I wrote that in the book. And again, I wrote it more for the younger folks, although people that are older and my age, is so much information in there about medical cannabis. I don't care what you think you know, you don't know at all. And all of it isn't in that book either, but a hell of a lot more than you know. So buy the book and read it. And like we say about Time for Hemp, spread the word out on this. Use these are tools, these Zooms, these books, this work that Craig has done. These are tools that you should use yourself, or to at least use them as a foundation for doing whatever it is you're going to do with cannabis your way, which is what we want you to do. And so, Al Graham, now, your time I get to pontificate. Go ahead. It's your turn.
All right. Catch Pace Radio, which is people advocating cannabis educational radio at paceradio.net. We have a new broadcast that comes out every day of the week. So we're broadcasting 7 days a week. And today's discussion with Craig is basically time for memories, just like it is time for hemp.
Can I bring up one more person, a Canadian?
Yes.
I just want to say Mark Emery is a real hero of mine. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Mark.
He's been on my show so many times. Yeah, good old Mark. I love Mark.
Sure.
Jody.
he's a real hero in this space too, even though he was Canadian and he didn't come down to a lot of our events. He helped supply the seeds to America to help get the and he went to jail for it, but and then now it's legal to sell them anywhere in the U.S. and 52 countries we can ship to. But Mark Emery really helped change that and paid the price for it also, like so many of us did. And I think he spent 5 years in prison. And and he's not bitter at all. And I just feel so grateful for guys like him as an example of how to stand up for what you believe in, try to make a difference in the world, deal with the consequences if they come, and then still be able to move forward with your life.
And as Craig has also pointed out, there's been too many that have come and gone. And that is truly the reason why I continue to do Time for Hemp. I retired and said, I'm done with this a few years back. But then I kept hearing all the voices in my archives telling me that I had made a promise to each of them that I would do what I could to raise their voice around the world and get their message out to as many people as I could. And there's been a lot of people in my archives who, shortly before they passed away, made it a point to come on to Time for Hemp to tell their story so that someone out there in the audience who might be dealing with Crohn's disease or dealing with cancer or dealing with some kind of problem, maybe even going through an arrest and getting back out of jail and getting back into the world, can understand that there's been others that came before them that have also walked that path. And this is how they got through it. And this is how they managed to stay strong. And they wanted to make certain that their message did get heard. So when you come to timeforhemp.news, please make it a point to visit our archives and understand that is really the reason why all of us here make it a point to take Time for Hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison